Hello to all my friends of our area. In this time, I will have a pleasure to talk with Mr. Daniel Borins and Jennifer Marman. They are from Canada and they are visual artists and architects. And in this time, they will talk about the SFC bridge. How are you, Marman?
Hi.
Hello.
So I'm
Hi.
Daniel.
I'm Jennifer.
Yes, we're visual artists. We work as multidisciplinary artists in painting, sculpture, installation, using traditional ways of exhibiting in museums or galleries. But we also do public projects. Some of them that involve architectural examples, such as the SFC bridge, which is in downtown Toronto. And that's the reason that we're talking with you today.
Okay. Yeah, we have seen the SF bridge, and we have some questions. So one of these is what is the inspiration for this bridge? You know, the design.
Okay, so the time that something like this takes. I think we got notice in around 2012 for this project, or 2013. And this project was a competition, and it's based on certain government principles in Toronto, which is called 1% for art. So when there is a major development that is built in downtown Toronto or surrounding areas, the municipality has the opportunity to ask the developer to make an artistic expression. In this case, this project was very, very strange because there's not many examples where an architectural gesture is also combined with an artistic gesture. So we think that the time period there was a competition and then the presentation of ideas. So we were competing against, I think, 3 other teams. And then there's the winning of the competition based on, I guess, certain merits in our practice and ideas that we presented. And then there was the development of the concept to the point where maybe a year later, we presented the first set of drawings and iterations. But then there were problems with the budget for the concept that we presented. And then we potentially spent about another year working on it. And then the bridge was finished in
2015.
In 2015. So and the construction time was about
I don't know about that. But the inspiration of the bridge was based on a few existing factors. So the bridge had to join a new building development with an existing convention center. And the bridge is positioned very close to railway tracks. So basically, it was public art that was also going to be infrastructure for pedestrian passageway.
So it's a lot of things. You're asking about the timeline, and then we're talking about the inspiration and purpose, which is a valid comment because it isn't necessarily the question that's been asked. So in terms of just answering the specific question, is that something like this can't be done faster than, let's say, like a year to 2 years, and then there'd be many different aspects. Are you also asking us for the inspiration behind the bridge?
Yes.
Okay, so then in terms of addressing the inspiration, everything that Jennifer said is valid, and let's see if we can add some more points. So we talk about the existing condition. Okay, so the existing condition of the site is that to the north of it, okay, the bridge crosses Simcoe Street, which runs north-south, and then it arrives at a new set of streets that were made, but the nearest street that has always existed in Toronto would be Lakeshore. So to the south is a highway, and to the north of it are train tracks and an underpass. It's difficult for pedestrians to get from Front Street, which is that the let's say the north side where the major train station called Union Station is. It's difficult for pedestrians to negotiate their way because of the existing infrastructure of the train tracks. Connecting this new part of the city, which is called the South Financial Core or the South Financial Center, is a development which is called the Path Network. The Path Network is a series of underground corridors and tunnels with shops and retail and restaurants and so on. The city is trying to make a way for pedestrians to move, through, but also to avoid things like the harsh weather conditions that we have in the winter, or some conditions on street level that aren't good for pedestrians. So if you had to walk the traditional way to get into the business core, it might take longer. So this bridge addresses a variety of nexus points, interconnected nodal zones, twists and turns. So already we had a set of ideas which are about tying space together, space that is being incongruous or challenged, and trying to find a language there.
And then in fact, there was also a physical condition that we had to answer to, and that became an inspiration for the design as well. And that is, we were instructed by the developer and planners on the project that the bridge had to take a turn. So we couldn't go directly from A to B. The bridge starts from one development, it crosses the street and lands on a pier. So it goes from east to west, lands on a pier, and then turns northwards. So we were dealing with not a straight line, but a zigzag or a sharp turn. And so this also came into play when we were designing the bridge.
Plus, we were dealing with a slight slope of like I can't remember, like
5 degrees.
5 degrees. It's not such a slight slope.
Or closer to 7.
Yeah. So the bridge is on a slight incline from the hotel side, which is the right side when you're looking at the images, to the convention center, which is on the left side. And there was also an existing bridge called the Sky Bridge that was built at the end of the 1980s, around 1989 or so. The understanding of joining the downtown financial district to the lakeshore in Toronto. So that also informed a set of principles. So the fact that the bridge is a slight boomerang shape or delta shape started to get us thinking about what the design should be. The idea of zigzagging, the idea of crisscrossing,
of wrapping,
and then the idea of wrapping. So there's a set of visual principles that we could also answer to. Perhaps, do you have another question?
Yes.
Yes.
You say about the inclination.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have some problems with the structure?
With the incline, it was an engineering challenge, but as far as our design, it worked with the idea of angles, and what we decided to do was, given we had to take this turn, given we were interested in the idea of wrapping and movement, but that we also wanted to reflect the structure of the bridge. So the truss work itself is actually the basis for the diagonal wrapping pattern that covers the exterior of the bridge.
So, for example, there's different ways to build a bridge. So the bridge could just have a tremendous amount of steel beams along the bottom, or in order to make it lighter, it would have a triangular truss system. So then in looking at the design of the incline, of the fact that it has this triangular nexus point at its southernmost point, and then looking at the triangular truss structure, we started to see the potential for an expression of wrapping. So on the outside, we have these large bands that bind the bridge together. And on the inside, we were looking at how can we express the frenetic pace of the city, contrasting architectural elements that a pedestrian would see when looking outside, and how can we make an expression of perspective that isn't like a 1-point perspective or 2-point or 3-point perspective. How can we create a perspective that is an idea of expansion inside the bridge? So you have wrapping and tightening on the outside, and expansion and non-perspective on the inside. So those two themes started to arise. And then we were looking at the budget. The budget informed part of the design. So what people don't understand when they're looking at an architectural project is that there's not unlimited budget for it. We had only so much budget for glazing or the window openings. There's only so much budget for what the surface covering of the bridge would be. So in fact, it's also value engineered and design developed simultaneously. So we were looking at how to make urban infrastructure, which is not normally something that is designed, it is quite Spartan and without design, into something that is a noteworthy landmark, but also is a visual experience for the pedestrian moving through. So there's some people who look at only the artistic gesture of something like a Calatrava bridge. But this is not in the same budgetary level. So it's a clever use of space, of modalities of abstract art, of expression of narrative points, the wrapping and the expansion, of expressions of being off kilter because of the slope, and talking about a holistic image that we're presenting. That's what the collaboration between artists, architects, the developer, the city, and the art consultants can bring when considering a piece of infrastructure which is supposed to enable pedestrian mobility. So that's the purpose of the bridge, is for pedestrians to be able to safely cross and go from one architectural space into another. But the challenge is, what happens when that becomes a public artwork or like a commissioned work of art? So instead of being a sculpture, what kind of thinking will arise when all of those formerly mentioned teams of people get together and discuss what a potential new space can be?
Okay. The last question. What material do you use in the project? Because it seems really interesting. The material you use in the inside and outside.
We looked at several different kinds of material solutions. So everything from like standing seam pattern, because we wanted to express linear wrapping, to the idea of scales or shingles, to the idea of panel systems. So you can see that what we landed with is the panel system, and then working with James Camsey, our architecture partner, who's the third part of this team, we came up with the idea that we can express the idea of bricks or an interlocking motion in the panel system used. So the panels are aluminum and painted and modular, but you have to think of the pattern. So the pattern is like interlocking brick system. That system can refer to like causeways or streets, the idea of pathways. So you have the dark color and the light color, and then you have the hexagonal patterns, which then frame the windows, and the windows have that interlocking brick pattern. And then you have the inside. So to answer the question about the inside is to use relatively affordable material, which is drywall. And then you'll see in some of the drawings that we sent you, we worked a lot on imagining the space as two-dimensional surface pattern, but then together composing that in 3D views. So it's drywall, gypsum plaster on the inside, but then we worked with a mural company to paint to paint that inside. So you have the inside is like you're in an abstract painting, something which is like not never used in architecture, but not used that much because we're disrupting the interior with a kind of an expression of digital camouflage or dazzle pattern, or using voids like Russian constructivist art, but doing that within a spatial construction. So there's interesting dialogue between the two-dimensional drawing and three-dimensional space, and the idea of the mural or the fresco, and bringing that all together as a scheme. So we think that it is like that is a unique aspect.
It was a very complex process, the interior painting of the space. It involved us supplying digital files of the layout, and then it was black, white, and 5 different shades of gray.
So we're doing color tests and mock-ups and evaluating the space. So you see that a little bit in our drawing sets as well, because we're thinking about the perspective lines that somebody's seeing when they're inside the bridge, and how do we create something that suggests distance, but then how do we distort that interior space to make it look both larger and smaller at times. So we're creating a sense of an altered experience of scale.
And the contractor that we worked with did everything they could in order to execute our vision as we wanted. So access panels were all hidden or flush with the drywall. So little details like that made the overall results more successful as well, the attention to detail.
Yeah, and some things that maybe are regrettable but look good in photographs are like the railing details. Those have to be there because of
the slope.
Of the slope and universal access. So the slope is big enough inside the bridge that it has to have a handrail through the center, so that somebody feels slightly destabilized.
Well,
inside.
and in fact, the slope was great enough that we were required to have landings as well. So there are slopes and then there are landings inside the interior.
But do you want to talk about, so what does it bring, like, as an experience of space? It's, for example, it's like popular on Instagram, or it's a way for people to feel a sense of ownership or inspiration by public space. So we do this with like piazzas or squares or parks, but we don't necessarily do this enough in terms of designing underpasses or overpasses or some of the areas that are more infrastructural. So it shows that there's the potential to create meaningful spaces out of spaces that are normally utilitarian and only designed by an engineer. It's interesting because if you look in some of the pictures, you see the original Sky Bridge, and it has like no architectural consideration. And you can see the difference over, let's say, something like 30 years ago to today is the importance being put on a meaningful infrastructural space that is designed. So you see the design and art are influencing the everyday experience. And I think that's reflected in like a lot of images of adolescents using that in their Instagram profile, or to have fashion shoots in there, or to sometimes they shouldn't be doing this, but skateboarding in the bridge. It shows that it's a space that people are interested in, as opposed to just being a non-space. It becomes a place now, which is an interesting idea.
Okay. Okay, I have a plus, plus question. It can be, what advice do you have for young architects that are about to graduate from here in America and Latin America, and how they can see the architecture in the world,
Well, in Latin America, I think that architecture, it says a lot about sustainability. And I think that people in North America and the rest of the world are looking for solutions that are have a rationale along those lines. I think that some of the budgets in Central America are not good compared to these like showcase budgets in China, and these like showcase even like tertiary cities. So that's also a challenge for us here in Canada, because we want to make exciting projects, but the budgets aren't necessarily there. So I think that for students who are graduating, the opportunities that exist are like in pavilions, in sustainability, and then in also international competitions, and putting the best foot forward, saying that this is what your knowledge base is, and working on a style. Conversely, in some of your work, Daniel, and this presents the potential for residential projects, for example, that could be done. I think that the education you get from visual art or from architecture is applicable in a variety of disciplines. So not just in visual art, not just in architecture, but in an increasingly visual based culture that we exist in. So architects and artists are good at presenting an idea and presenting it through visual means. And the more you do this, I think the better it is for you, and the more attention that you can gain.
And I'd add to that, and I think it's implied by what Daniel was saying, but also collaborations, and collaborations not necessarily just with other architects, but collaborations with other creative fields. So as we said earlier, we collaborate with an architect on our public projects, and that's been a very productive collaboration for Daniel and I and our architect colleague.
And then we normally tell younger artists, and the same would go for architects, that it's important to collectivize and to develop opportunities for yourself. So you need to, if the opportunities don't look like they exist, you need to go to your municipality or to your region or country and make suggestions for ways in which to gain exposure. So that might be to produce a sustainable piece of architecture, to produce low-cost housing, to say that a cultural center needs to be produced, or to say that there needs to be, for example, an architecture festival in Honduras so that people are engaged. There's always the opportunity for biennials that exist in other countries and so on, But there never is the harm in inviting people to your country to do exchanges. But you have to take the matter into your own hands and your own control, because there's too many people who want to just have an opportunity. You have to make them for yourself.
Okay. Thank you for this interview. It has been very interesting to all these people, to all these students and architects too. And this is the first bridge that we have interviewed, first bridge design, and it's very valuable for this channel, this YouTube channel. So maybe in the future we can have more interviews, because this educative content is very good for us. So
yeah, maybe we'll have another bridge to talk about with you. Okay, good talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You enjoyed this.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.